Hello, hello. Welcome to the Eclipse Evolution podcast. I'm your host, Savannah Rose. I'm so excited to have you here today. Thank you for tuning in wherever you're tuning in from. I'm so excited that this audience and community has grown to just a global reach. So whether you're tuning in from the UK or from Canada or Poland, wherever you're tuning in from, thank you from the bottom of my heart. And thank you as well to my amazing guest today, Zoey Charif. I'm so excited to have her today. Not only is she lovely if you're viewing us via video, just in the few minutes we've connected in the green room, she's just been a delight. And I think that her background is extremely interesting, as well as her book that she recently published. And I can't wait for her to share more about herself, her expertise, and I know you all are going to gain some amazing nuggets of wisdom. So Zoey, I would love for you to introduce yourself and we can get going.
Thank you so much, Savannah. I'm so excited to be here. I'm excited to speak to all of you. And to get my message out, and I sincerely hope that it resonates. So my name is Zoey. I wrote a book on love and how to calculate love, and also how to measure self-love and partner love, and what happens when the scores are a match, what happens when the scores are quite different from one another, and how to build a healthy relationship based on that. So my background, my educational background is in criminology, but I'm a business owner, I'm an entrepreneur, and my side hobby has always been understanding love. And yeah, so I've been writing this book for about 6 years. I published it in November. It's available in Barnes and Noble now, so I'm just excited to get the message out because I sincerely think that it could help, because it's helped me a lot, and I've heard some really good reviews on it helping others with healing and just building self-confidence.
Yes, ma'am. Well, congratulations. I know it takes a lot to write and publish and release a book, so congratulations on your firstborn.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Yeah, it was quite a journey. This idea came to me back in college, so 18 years ago, 18, 19 years ago. And
Wow.
yeah, I just always kept it in my back pocket, and I refined it over and over again. Um, and eventually I validated the theory when I studied data analytics. And through 300 surveys, I actually confirmed that I can, in fact, predict love, calculate love, also heal relationships if something is misaligned.
Wow, that's amazing. You already read my mind, because when I saw that you had your background in data and criminology, I'm like, those are two things that I don't feel like people will hear about enough, but would apply to something like love. And because I think love is, we confuse it to be like strictly emotional, but I think that when you're really diving into a conscious partnership and that conscious self-love, that you have to have analytics, you have to use that rational mind as well as your emotional mind.
Absolutely. I totally agree with you. You know, love is such a beautiful emotion, and there's nothing wrong with attaching spirituality to it. There's nothing wrong with an understanding of soulmates and soul contracts. But with that said, at the extreme, we start to romanticize relationships that are not healthy. So essentially, this formula, it doesn't bypass emotions or anything. It just makes sure that you're making sound decisions and smart decisions when choosing to engage with a partner. And I know for me, I was kind of falling into a pattern of, being connected to the right people. And I understood that I simply did not have the right values there, where I was requiring a partner to show up for me as a rock, but also the trait preferences that I had listed had nothing to do with well, I wouldn't say it didn't have anything to do with goodness, but I would say that they weren't necessarily conducive to a healthy relationship, right? Like age, for example, or cultural background. What does that have to do with a healthy relationship? So yeah, I would say that although there's a lot of romance in love and a spiritual understanding and attachment to love, does not mean that we can't make good choices in love.
That's so well put. I love that you explain it that way, because I think that it's recognizing those patterns, and it sounds like your expertise in your book really help people reflect on the recognition of those patterns and how they can move more from that subconscious place to that conscious place of making those choices and really reflecting on why they choose the people that they do, and maybe choosing people not realizing they're choosing the same unhealthy things. I think it's so important to bring awareness to that.
Absolutely. In fact, back in 21, I was going through a pretty bad breakup. And I applied the concepts of the book to this breakup. I'm like, why does it hurt so much? How can I heal from this? And I realized that my top 5 values were not in line with health, with a healthy standard in a relationship. So one thing we found from the data analytics is that people were consistently putting honesty and dependability as their top value. I wasn't doing that. And why would I not do that? Don't you want a partner that's going to show up for you as a rock? So once I started to realize, no, this has to be a value, otherwise I'm going to shoot myself in the foot, right? When I'm falling and engaging in partnership. Once I added that to my top values, I started attracting a completely different crowd. In fact, as I was going through this breakup, I met someone at the dog park who's now my husband, right? Yeah, and that's because I switched around my values, and beyond that, I also changed my trait preferences. That's a little harder to change because that's a bit more inherent, and it's more personality, it's more like what you're just inherently attracted to. And I mean, sometimes you can't choose what you're attracted to, but I think just writing it down just allowed me to gain a level of self-awareness that it's like, no, I want to step out of this self-harm because that breakup was just so bad. And I told myself I am not doing that to myself again, right? So yeah, so I met Kevin. I'm like, well, the calculations work. So, and then lo and behold, we got married, and now I have a rock that I'm so attracted to, that I laugh with. And yeah, it all comes down to that self-awareness and then making smart choices based on that.
I love your story. That's so powerful and compelling. And I think too, like, you really sparked my curiosity with how you were changing the preferences. Because I think I've seen this chatter about preferences being almost, I would say, confused with attachment, like unhealthy attachment, because I see some people who are in the dating pool who are like having this incongruency with what they want versus like what they're putting up with, for lack of a better word. So I want someone who is X, Y, and Z. Those maybe are their preferences. And then it's almost like trying to make a square peg fit in a round hole, where they have someone who maybe has some of those preferences, but when it comes down to their values or what they're really looking for in a partner, it's almost like they're overlooking the values side of things because those preferences are overruling. And I wonder, like, at least for what I've seen, like the attachment piece has been like a huge driver behind like that overriding. I'm just curious what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, I mean, you just touched on something very important in the book. There's a personality type that I identified. So when you lean more towards values, that's the practical personality type, right? That means that what drives your choices are more practical, i.e., you're looking at values, right? More than traits. When you're an emotional, that means that attraction will drive your choices, right? So between both sides, there's the healthy personality type and the extreme personality type. That means that there are healthy emotionals out there where you're just slightly leaning towards trait preferences, but still very much taking values into account. And based on our data, this is actually the group that was able to sustain relationships longer. And then there's the extreme emotional. I used to fall in the extreme emotional personality type. Why? Because I was not paying attention to values the way I should have, right? And I was like, well, this person just sparks something in me and I feel so drawn and oh my God, and they're so sexy and all of that, right? Super unhealthy if it's taken to an extreme. Right. So with that said, I totally agree with you. And there is a group of people that fall into this personality type where they are driven by romanticizing of these emotions, right? And they call it the runner chaser, they call it soulmate contracts, they call it all these spiritual things, which I'm a very spiritual person. I believe in that, but not to the extent where it's causing self-harm. And if it is, then that soul contract is not keep self-sacrificing. Your angels do not want you to hurt yourself, right? That's not the point, in my opinion, of being here on Earth, right? And beyond that, if you do fall in that personality type, just, to let you know, you're not likely going to hold on to that relationship, because that's what our analytics showed, that it creates imbalance in the relationship. And unfortunately, you project unhealed behaviors, i.e. toxic behaviors, within the relationship.
Yes, so well said. And I think that, something I teach a lot of my clients is, and you put this beautifully too, where it's like emotional always remains a part of it, but it's just about having that balance. Like you can lean a little more towards the emotional, but it sounds like if you're not able to have that self-awareness of how much like the emotions are driving you, something can be built, like the relationship can be built off of those emotional whims. And then as soon as the emotions change, like y'all go through a hardship or someone is acting differently or whatever the case may be, like those emotions shift, it's like boom, that can be catastrophic for that relationship.
Absolutely. It's true. And the reality is that love feels so good. It's an ecstasy, it's a euphoria, but it can also border on emotional dysregulation. So if you feel that ecstasy easily, sadly, your emotions can very easily drop as well. Right? So when you're emotionally dysregulated, you're more likely to fall into this extreme emotional bucket, right? And I genuinely believe that we've all been there at some point. We've all been in love. We've all just, like been consumed by thoughts of someone else, right? It happens. And I think that's a part of being human, right? But
Sure.
that said, I think it's very important to check yourself, because if you don't check yourself and if you start running or falling in the spiral of God wanted it this way and my angels wanted it and there must be something meant to be, there's probably a meaning there. I get that, but the longer you stay in there, the more you'll self-harm.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mhm.
That's so well put. Absolutely. And I agree with you. I'm also a super spiritual person. I mean, I have the Lover's Tarot card
I saw
behind me.
that. I saw that. I love it. I love it. I love tarot. It's like my hidden passion that no one really knows about. This is the first time I'm telling people.
Oh, well, I'm honored. This is a safe
Yeah.
space. Listen, I love the will. Bring on the will.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Because I think, and as women, I think that the intuitive practices, the spiritual practices, like that's one of our birthrights to really fine tune and lean into. And I wanted to dive more into how you were describing like the self harm versus like self love aspect. I think that that's something that really stood out to me when you reached out, and also just in our conversation so far, is how self-love is a key ingredient on this journey. I know I certainly have had to learn that, and I would just love to hear more of your thoughts on your perspective on self-love and its influence.
Sure. So the way the framework understands self-love is how you show up based on your own standards, right? So this is what we call values in the framework. So if you pick your top 5 values, it could be purpose, it could be career, it could be a family, whatever it may be, right? You score yourself against each one based on how you feel you show up. And then you tally up that score. And essentially, whatever that total is, it's a numerical assessment of self-respect and self-love. Okay, here's what we found from the analytics. If you have low self-respect, self-love, i.e. the self-score, you're not likely going to engage in a healthy relationship. If you have high self-score, you are more likely to engage in a healthy relationship, especially if you also admire your partner. So the best relationship turned out to be when your partner was 4% above you. That was the best relationship. If they were 5% below you, sadly, it seems like eventually it breaks down, because if you were to interpret this number, it means that the admiration is not necessarily there. There might be a part of you that feels unfulfilled. So we found if it's 5% lower for the partner, they tend to be on a break. If it's 10% lower for the partner, it was a mutual breakup. If it was 16% lower, it means they were broken up with, and then 25% if they did the breaking up. All to say there's only one group that showed 2 high self scores, and that was the group that was currently together. I know that's a lot of analytics kind of thrown your way.
Oh, I'm loving it. Yeah.
Okay, but to wrap up and interpret this info, it's you cannot love someone else unless you love yourself. I literally numerically validated this. If you don't give yourself a high self score, you're not going to show up well. And the goal is not to lie to yourself, by the way. The goal is to ask yourself, why am I giving myself a 10 or half points for family? Am I A, being hard on myself, or am I actually not showing up for family? How do I change this? How do I make myself the best that I can be and show up the best way that I can for family? Now, whatever your values are, you do the same for the other ones. What can I do? And at the end of the day, it is all self-perception. I realized 4 years ago when I was going through the awful breakup, I was really hard on myself, and I was way too easy on him. So initially, his score was 16% above mine. And when I put pen to paper, I'm like, boy, this is infatuation. This is not healthy. Why am I
Mm.
infatuated? It's not like this human should be that grand, right? So what ended up happening was I put things into perspective for myself. And I told myself, this is not a score that I deserve. I deserve more than this. And I told myself, be easy on yourself. Don't be so self-critical. Also, look at the reality. This person is not a rock. Look at the reality. Don't suffer from delusions, right? Maybe you had a few good moments here and there. That's not the net of what's happened. This was a net negative with him, not a net positive, right? All to say, sorry, a very big roundabout way of saying you can't love someone else unless you love yourself. You will not fall into a healthy relationship unless you love yourself. And there are ways to measure your self-love.
Oh my gosh, I'm just like, give me a spoon because I just want to eat all of this up. I love it. It's amazing. You're so brilliant,
You're
Zoe. Oh
so
my gosh.
sweet. Thank you so much, Savannah.
I'm being so for real. Like it's so fascinating, and I can tell how much work and intention and thought you've put into this process. This deserves to pop off because it's so smart and it's so I mean, just everything you're saying is like I can even just with my own background and experience, I'm like, wow, that's all being supported in my line of work. So I'm just loving it. It's
I'm
amazing.
so glad it resonates. I'm very happy.
Yeah, it does. It does. And I think, I mean, something I even teach my own clients, like to support what you're saying here is like you need a partner, not a project. Because I think I see this, well, honestly, I see this balanced in all genders. But I think sometimes like this need that people have if they don't have that deservability installed yet and like they haven't embodied self-love fully where they kind of confuse being loved with being needed, and so when they kind of choose a partner who maybe they don't see as an equal, but someone that they can quote like fix, or like, oh, maybe if I just work harder or do this, then I'll get the love that I want. And I feel like that's just such a downward spiral recipe because one, it's dehumanizing to that individual, the one who they are viewing as a project. But two, it's automatically setting them up to receive less. And I just feel like that's really unfair to that individual. And it's I think a huge paradigm shift when you're able to recognize yourself, what you bring to the table, and know that you are proof that that can exist in someone else, and then seek out and attract that equal partner. So
Yeah.
um,
I mean,
I think it's powerful.
yeah, I mean, honestly, you're on point. In fact, I dedicate a whole chapter on this. It's called the self-sacrificer versus the self-focused dynamic. So when you relate this back to the framework, essentially you're saying, I have my list of values, but rather than working on my self-score, I'm going to work on the partner score. So if I am
Mm,
rating, let's say, again, going back to family as one of my top values, rather than reaching out to my own family, making sure that I'm showing up for them, that I'm showing up as a daughter, as a sister, whatever it may be, I'm showing up for my partner's family, or I'm encouraging him and making sure that he's bumping up his score within that, right? That's a self-sacrificer. And at the end of the day, the analytics also showed that if your partner sees you as less than them, or if you see yourself as less than them, it's not going to work. It's not going to work. You're going to start projecting behaviors within the relationship that are not balanced, that tend to be fueled by insecurity, right? And also kind of, insecurity.
that makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. I'm curious, did you notice any patterns with, I guess, like themes that people would project onto others? I'm sure, like you mentioned, insecurity is a big one, but I'm curious, like, what other projections were common?
Yeah, the distortions were, it was very interesting for me to write about. There are a ton of distortions actually that I found. So one of them was the dependent versus the independent, right? So the dependent will assume that they need their partner score to boost their own score. So for example, if I really want to get into entertainment, right? Rather than working on myself to get myself out there, whether it's auditions or whatever, I may be looking for someone who's already reaching that entertainment status, the high status, and I'm latching onto their score. I become a dependent. I'm assuming that my value is based on their value. Does that make sense? And if they are in
Totally.
an independent, that means that they're going to get drained by me just latching on, right? And assuming I need them. Another one is the infatuation. This is when you score someone way above you. That is so not healthy. There's definitely something wrong there. There's no reason for anyone to be that much above you. And if for whatever reason they are, that's not a relationship that you're looking at. You're looking at a mentor. You're looking at, you know what I mean? They're not going to see you the same, not in a balanced way, right? The hero distortion was another. This one is a highly manipulative distortion where, let's say, actually, I'm going to give you my own personal little example of this.
Yeah, I love it.
So,
Thank you for being.
yeah, back in the day when I was writing the book, I connected with someone who was very intelligent in LA. And when I met him, he said, "Hey, Zoe, I can get this book for you, like to like great heights," right? And I'm like, "Oh, that's interesting." But I was always honest with him about where I stood with him romantically. I was not interested in him romantically, and I was very open about that, right? In the beginning, I'm like, let me see, but eventually I realized that I didn't want it, right? The moment that I was firm with him about not wanting anything romantic, he was done with me, right?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
I've been
So
there.
the hero distortion essentially says that, hey, I have a high score. Here's what you need. Let me be your hero, right? This is a savior distortion. This is a false hero. It's highly manipulative. And if you don't feed their ego, they will poke at you so hard, you know, and unfortunately I've experienced this enough in my lifetime, not just for the book, right, but for other things, like whether it was career or whatever, you know what I mean? And now I just see it from a mile away. It's like this person is trying to flex their score, and they're trying to use their score somewhere that they know they're achieving, you know, a good amount of success, and they're manipulating me. They're manipulating me into thinking that I need them. Does that make sense? So this was an interesting distortion that I uncovered. Um, yeah, there's literally a ton more that I could go through the list with.
Yeah, no, I 100% well have experienced that myself. I remember you're right. Like when you said like you can see it a mile away now, it's something that like it almost has like an odor to it. Like when you start to pick up on someone who's engaging in that kind of behavior, and it's almost like unnecessary ego like spitting. Where it's like I love when people can share about themselves, and I love a strong personality, but when it's just like incessant details about stuff, I'm like, is this relevant? I don't know. Yeah, I
Yeah,
remember
yeah.
experiencing that. Yeah, and as someone who was like trying to collaborate with me, we did collaborate on a couple of things. But I just noticed it was all this like really big talk. It was all a lot of big talk, and a lot of talk about like his quote intentions with me of like I just want to be friends. I just want to be friends. I
Fine.
never want to make you uncomfortable. I just want to be friends. And I was just kind of like, if you just want to be friends, why are you telling me this 50 times? Like, that's so weird. And lo and behold, when he saw me dating someone, contact over, gone, ghost, no business collabs, like nothing. And I'm like, what happened to just being friends?
I know. Yeah, no, it happens for sure. And sadly, it works. It works with a lot of women. In fact, I gave
Yeah.
the example in the book of what was that director's name who's in jail now? My God, I'm uh Harvey Weinstein. Harvey Weinstein?
Yeah.
Classic, classic. He has a very high score in entertainment. He knows it. He manipulated women over and over again. And sadly for them, they felt like that was their way to get into a very niche industry, highly competitive industry, right? What happens if this woman does not give in to their ego, into their demands? They were done from the industry. So I personally find this distortion to be a highly, not just manipulative, but highly controlling, borderline abusive, right? Of course, there's a scale in terms of how far they'll go. But yeah, I know for me personally, like, yeah, it's, you really need to be a strong person and not like internalize that when they snap at you for not playing into their ego.
Absolutely. And I think that bolsters up even more your support of the self love aspect. Because I think if I had been, gosh, if it was me 5 years ago when I didn't really know what I brought to the table, or I hadn't built the success that I've built for myself, because I knew from the very beginning, like, I don't need this person. Like, I just knew. And I'm like, this could be fun, but it's not going to make or break anything for me. I'm just doing this because I thought it would be
Yeah,
fun.
I hear that.
and I think that that was like my best to leverage, but I had to get to that point. And so I think that that's something I would just encourage any listeners to look at and maybe even take an inventory of. And I'm sure your book has something along these lines of just like identifying and bringing that self-awareness to like what do you bring to the table, and keeping that at the front of your mind. You don't have to, like you said, like look for a hero.
Absolutely. And you're right. I do talk about that, how to rebalance the distortion. First and foremost, like we have to pull ourselves out of assuming that we need anyone. No one can take your self score away from you. No one. But if you're depending on someone else's score to boost you up, that can very easily be taken away from you, right? Yeah, sometimes
Oh
it's
yeah.
a grind. That's what life is, right? But at least you know that that's secure. And also the way
Right.
you show up when you feel secure, when you feel like you're showing up high based on your own standards, that glow, no one can take that glow from you. No one can take that calmness away from your voice and that solid center away from you. No one can take away your peace of mind if you feel so great about yourself. So all to say, work on you. Like it's so important, and watch people get attracted to you. Work on you,
Mm,
like solidify your center and watch, like you will be a magnet. You're an empress at that point, right? From the tarot.
yeah.
That's the goal. That's the goal. You incorporate the Queen of Cups, the Queen of Pentacles, the Queen of Swords, and what's
Yeah.
the fourth? The Queen of Wands, right? And you become an empress. You literally have all those foundations to feel like, yeah, I got this, you know?
So inspiring, so well said. I'm curious, and since you've revealed that you are spiritual and everything, I'm curious, like your perspective on the yin and yang in these dynamics, like the masculine and feminine, because it sounds like your book is a fantastic resource to build that masculine within ourselves, of that analysis, of that protection, like that healthy protection within ourselves, like that ability to create like that structure for ourselves, which then I think allows us to melt into our feminine and to glow and to have that ease that attracts people our way. I'm curious like what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, I mean, thank you for asking. That's actually a very unique question. I've never heard that question before. The way I understand feminine versus masculine is right-brained. Yeah, right brain, right? So very logical, very structured, very like trying to understand, whereas the left brain is creative, it's emotional, it's in flow, right? So I think with love, we tend to be more in flow, more like what does my heart, right? What does my body want, right? This framework, I absolutely would agree that it's adding a masculine element to love. In other words, it's good to be in flow. Emotions are so important when you're connecting with someone. With that said, it has to make sense. And if you fall into patterns that don't make sense, you will experience, not the greatest experience, right? You may learn a lot, but I just, in my experience, if you don't make smart decisions, you're not likely going to fall into something that's healthy, that's fulfilling, at least not in the long run, right? So yeah, I do believe that this absolutely captures a masculine aspect of love, but again, this is not to dismiss the flow. It's not to dismiss like the beauty of love, like your first dates and the flirtation and those butterflies and everything, right? If anything, it just says, hey, your brain is wired to create an offspring. We are still running by the reptilian brain. We're still humans. Evolution says that that is our core driving force, right? To have sex for the purpose of reproducing. We're still bound by that. So when we see a partner that's either a match or slightly better, it's like body says, "Ooh, that's the one I want to have sex with. That's the one I want to have babies with," right? And these are very subconscious primal instincts. It's okay to not have kids. I don't have kids, right? But that primal instinct is saying that's the one, that's the one I want, right? So then your body and your hormones start activating, your oxytocin, serotonin, dopamine, it's all out of whack, right? And that's
Right.
great,
Oh yeah.
right? But yeah, so as much as there's a very strong feminine element to love, because it's so flowy, because it's so emotional, there's also an explanation to love. And if we understand the explanation, that means that we can start shifting our patterns in love if we feel that we keep falling into just unhealthy relationships.
Absolutely. Yeah, well
Thanks.
said. That makes so much sense. And I think it's so important to have a tool like your book to help you remain grounded, I think, in that process so you can fully embrace the excitement and have it be real and have it not be something that is, like you mentioned before, like the infatuation piece. Like I know with my partner now, like we're very serious. We're not married yet, but we're getting there.
Hmm.
But I just remember when we first started talking and dating, like being so intentional about the analytics, really, of what were actually happening, not just like how I was feeling or like the fantasies that play out in my head, because I'm like a super romantic
Hmm.
person, but I have often in the past let myself get very carried away with
Hmm.
that. And so it was very much like a grounding of myself and staying mindful and present with like how he was actually showing up. And then of course over time, like everything was matching up, and I'm very grateful he's my partner, and he's the best man ever. But I think that, like, gosh, if it weren't for some of these lessons that we've learned, I would maybe still be on those old patterns and on that old path. So I think it's really important that you're covering like such a huge spectrum information. It's amazing.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate you sharing that. The reality is that we kind of grew up with movies and Disney movies and Hollywood movies thinking that love has got nothing to do with practicality and it's all like your emotions, right? Look at Aladdin and Jasmine. That was literally my favorite movie growing up, right? And that does not make sense. The scores were just
Yeah, yeah. It's like, oh, he lied to you from the very beginning, girl. Like, okay, it's a red
yeah. But that's what we learn, right? We learn about the Prince Charming, who's, all about love and nothing else matters and they're going to fight for you and whatever. That is not what life is, right? Hollywood movies is not what life is. And again, because love can be very addictive. It's beautiful, but that
flag.
beauty is highly addictive. It can very easily border on obsession and again, just self-harm, right? If you let yourself spiral. And now, thanks to the internet, now we have a lot of information online that can very easily validate dynamics that are not necessarily good for you. Like one of my favorite things to see online is the runner chaser. We are essentially romanticizing, saying, hey, this person doesn't want to be with you, but that's kind of, it's what the angels wanted. I don't know if I totally
Yeah.
believe that. We're dealing with someone who's an avoidant, who doesn't necessarily want to be with you, who's afraid of commitment, and I'm not saying all cases, I'm just saying that there's enough information out there where if you're experiencing something negative in a relationship, they're going to say, don't worry, it's meant to be this way. No, change it. Change your preferences,
Yeah.
change your values. This person is not good for you.
100%. Yeah. And I think that self love piece comes with like that self awareness and just becoming aware of attachment, really, and like how that can play a huge role. Because, like, especially with like the attachment types, if someone's avoidant and maybe you're anxious and that avoidant behavior keeps triggering those anxious behaviors, I think it can like lead us to telling this different story in our head. But I think when we have these speed bumps, these roadblocks, like the guidance in your book and so forth, it can help us kind of check, like, am I reacting to this person and that's becoming like my motivation to chase, or are they meeting me halfway? Like, are we actually connecting? I think that's really important.
Exactly. Exactly. Are you doing all the legwork emotionally? If you are,
Mm-hmm.
you're going to be drained, right? And again, as we know, that's not attractive to the opposite sex. If it is attractive, that means that you're falling in a dynamic with someone who's highly self-focused or in the extreme situation suffers from narcissistic personality disorder, right? Where they need to be kept on a
Right.
pedestal to be happy in a relationship. And that's not what we want. We want to feel love. We want, like love, like I said, is such a beautiful feeling, but if it's not reciprocated and you're doing all the legwork, like you're gonna hurt yourself. That inner glow is going to dissipate. The way you hold yourself in conversations, when you're out, when you're at work, it's like you're going to collapse inside and that's going to show in your body language. It's going to take away attracting luck. It's going to take away your glow. And yeah, so I totally agree with you that, like those behaviors, whether it's an avoidant, anxious attachments, that like it needs to be checked. And also
Mm-hmm.
beyond that, it needs to be understood. One thing that
Mm-hmm.
I found from the book and from the framework is that people who tend to be anxious, they have low self-score, right? So the average for women was 76%. If you're below maybe like a 70%, you're likely going to fall under the anxious attachment style. If you're above an 80%, you're
Mm-hmm.
likely going to fall under secure.
Mm-hmm. Wow, just all the information, all the data. It just makes me so excited. Just because I think it's something that is so necessary for all types of people. Because one of the resources that I have created is a magazine that's dedicated to men and them understanding themselves and their mental wellness, as well as like their sexuality and relationships. And I feel like this is going to be such a great resource to recommend to men specifically. I mean, I think everybody under the sun will
Mhm.
benefit, but I'm excited to have this resource for men because I think men are so much more comfortable with analytics, and not that women aren't, but I think men, that's like one of their more natural languages that they're conditioned to. And so I think being able to relay this information in a way that's already kind of translated for what they're used to, I think is going to really help a lot of these themes resonate. So I'm really excited to share this with
Yeah.
people if you can't already.
No, thank you so much. In fact, so with the framework, so when I was connecting with Kevin, and I think we were on our 6th month of dating, we actually did the love formula together. And we both had high scores for ourselves and, the partner, right? So that was very positive. Now, I'll be honest with you, clearly marriage is not easy. There's been many moments of misalignment, many moments where I was falling short in his eyes and he was falling short in my eyes. We ended up using this as a tool for communication. I think that men are very logical and they're very literal. Women, we can read. I'm so sorry for the men. I feel that women can often read between the lines, and I feel that we have two signals at play. We have our AM signal, which is the verbal, and we have a very strong FM, which is, let's say, body language, reading between the lines, right? We don't always get it right, but I do think
Oh,
that
I
ours is
love that.
stronger because we have high emotional intelligence, and I think that we pick up on energy, right? Men, bless you guys, from my experience, the signal AM is really strong, and sometimes the FM is just a little, cranked down, which is okay, right? But with that said,
Yeah.
I found that using this framework to explain certain things to my husband Kevin has been very beneficial, and also to understand how I'm showing up against his standards, his values, right? And that I got lazy. There are definitely moments where I got lazy with my communication and I could have been softer. There were moments where he got a little
Sure.
lazy with the reliability aspect, right? So in being able to understand where we were 3 years ago and after getting married, and again, like, it's not easy, right? You constantly have to communicate, and you live with someone, and sometimes you have a bad day and whatever. It's so important to come back, and just, how do I put it? Not reset, but essentially come back, right? Like, check in with one another, check in with one another. And actually, what I found was we had allowed ourselves to get quite lazy to a point where there was like a 10-point difference, which is not good because the analytics will show it's not sustainable. 10-point difference is not going to work. One of you will get frustrated, depleted, whatever it may be, right? So we both started working on getting better, right? Because we don't want to lose our marriage, right? So, all to say, for the men out there who are more logical, which is completely understandable because men can be quite literal, right? This is an excellent tool, to see if a person is a good match to you, but also if you're in a relationship, to get back to a place of alignment.
I love that. I think that's so important, and I think it's really exciting to have that baseline, that framework, to model off of, because that's something I see too. Because I work with a lot of folks in trauma recovery, and in that realm, like a lot of trauma recovery and dating after abusive relationships, which I've experienced myself, and I have seen this with clients and with friends, where it's like, if all they have ever known have been unhealthy relationships, whether it's like how they grew up and seeing their parents fighting or whatever it is, or they've just like continued in that pattern for so long because they didn't know any better, or they just don't know how to not be in that pattern. I sometimes see this like paralysis of like not wanting to be in a relationship because they don't know how to be in a healthy one, or maybe they do finally find a healthy partner and it just feels weird. I know I've experienced that with my partner too, where it's like I'm like, wait a minute, like I've had anxiety because everything is going so great, because I'm like, wait a minute, like you still love me and you're okay with me being like emotional, and you're okay with like I'll have those moments, like not as much anymore, but like I remember in the beginning it almost felt like too good to be true in some ways, because I was just so used to that dysfunction, and like that PTSD was still showing up. So I love that this is a resource for couples, for individuals, and something that you can go back to time and time again. I think that's
Yeah,
so valuable.
yeah. Well, I'm sorry to hear about your background, but it definitely sounds like there was self-awareness there and that you healed from it, right? And I understand like
Oh yeah.
stability can feel very foreign. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Safety
for
can
sure.
at times feel boring, right? But at
Yeah,
the end of the day, the flip side to that is the constant stimulation is going to keep your nervous system on edge. And the lack of
right.
predictability, the lack of, like I said, stability or having a rock there, like it's going to keep you so much on edge that you're not going to be able to focus on those things that you value most in the world, whatever it may be. Whatever it may be. And then you're so focused on like understanding your partner and it's like what's going to happen today and all of that, right? It's so consuming and it's just, yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm happy for you. I'm happy for you that you healed out of that and I can relate to that. Back in, 4 years ago, 5 years ago, that's what I had to heal from and ask myself, why am I doing this? I was in my mid 30s and I essentially told myself, if you keep doing this, your soul is going to get crushed.
Yeah.
So I was over my own shit, excuse my language.
No, girl, it's so real. And I've been over my own shit. Like that was my project last year. Like I took a year to just like get real and to just really practice. And I kind of, I wouldn't say took it to an extreme. It felt like I took it to an extreme because I've been living so like compliant in that abusive relationship, that when I did start setting boundaries and enforcing boundaries and saying no to certain things or people because it wasn't aligned with my values, it was an adjustment. But I think ultimately it helped me attract my partner who I'm with today. So I feel you on that. But thank you for that. I really appreciate it. And yeah, I wouldn't change anything about my journey because it's led me to where I am today and who I'm with, and our
Yeah,
conversation right
yeah.
now.
And it sounds
So
like you're
I'm
very
grateful.
intelligent. You have a Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I think I just cut you off. Sorry. I think it cut out a little bit and I cut you off.
No, you're fine. You're good.
I was just gonna say, it sounds like your journey has set you up for very high empathy and understanding, and also like it sounds like you're a healer. I don't know that people can be healers unless they actually go through it. But the way you express your voice and your message, the way, like, yeah, like I feel the softness in you, right? Sounds like you've really channeled those experiences into a ripple effect of love and healing in the world. That's my take from what I hear.
Well, I'm blushing. Thank you. I appreciate that. And for sure, I think it's definitely like my purpose to be a healer. And I had to understand the value in that too, and how I couldn't. Because I think for some time I kept attracting people who needed healing. And who doesn't need healing? But again, I had to move out of that paradigm of project to partner as well. And of course, my partner and I, we've healed each other in many ways. Like I know, for example, you mentioned a second ago with like that, the framework being a baseline. That's something that like I think in our own way, I can't wait to read your book to just learn more and like all the details. But I think in our own way, we kind of have this adoption of a framework where we're both just learning how to communicate and do that
Hmm.
reset. Like I think just a week ago or so, I was upset about something, but I've taken time to understand that I need time to regulate before I bring something to him. Otherwise, I become too dependent on the conversation to regulate me. And that's something that he's also adjusting to, because I think he's used to having partners who will just like blow up or react. And so when I'm over here being mismindful, like, we'll talk soon, but I need a minute, it kind of put him on pins and needles because he is used to like things just like happening so fast. And then where I'm doing the opposite, it was an adjustment for
Hmm.
him. But I'm excited to learn more and again dive into those details in your book, because I think it's going to be great for us to continue to build upon, as well as like share with my audience too. You have like such valuable information, and it's so cohesive as well. I think it's amazing, because I think everything you've mentioned so far could be its own book, but the fact that it's like a masterpiece and it's all interwoven is so cool.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that I've had the chance to kind of talk about it. You're right, it is a massive framework, and I've touched on like the key pieces, but it all ties in together. And at the end of the book, there's actually this epilogue where I talked about like going through my journey of healing through the breakup from a few years back and how I met Kevin, right? But actually, I also wanted to touch on what you said. So Kevin and I, we have the same dynamic as you and your partner. I enjoy space because same thing, right, with the emotional regulation. I think in the beginning, because he's someone who really needs to like figure it out in that moment, right? He doesn't like that space because it puts him on edge, right? He just wants to solve it right away. This was actually quite a journey for us in terms of understanding what we need from each other. So we had to meet each other halfway. Now he meets me in the sense where he understands if I need space to just let it be, but I also don't take advantage of that space. And rather than huffing and puffing and going off and just letting it fester, I calm myself and I actually take that space to actually work on myself so that I can show up sooner and also kinder, because my communication absolutely, there were moments where it was slipping, and then I was projecting that into the relationship, he was projecting his crap into the relationship, and but again, like getting into a place of alignment and understanding each other and keeping nervous system calm and understanding that for each other too, I think has been super beneficial. And it sounds like you're having the same journey with your partner as well.
Definitely, yeah. I'm super grateful, and it's been so magical chatting with you, Zoey. I'm curious, was there anything because I know I asked you a million questions, was there anything that you just had on your heart that you would like to share?
Yeah, I think guys, like, and by guys I mean everyone, right? Guys and girls, like, your heart is so precious. Beyond your heart being so precious, you are so precious. Unless you recognize that in yourself, you're not gonna show up positively in the world. And I understand wounds. I understand a lack of self-confidence. I understand rock bottoms. I understand all of it, okay? But I also understand that if you allow yourself to stay there for too long and you don't utilize your brain and your mind to your benefit, especially in terms of your self-perception and how you show up, I'm afraid that you're going to continue to fall into patterns that are not healthy. And by the way, even when you do find that perfect person, don't assume that the work is done, right? But and I Exactly. It's really not. Like, my husband and I have fallen into toxic patterns within our marriage, you know what I mean? But again, the key is to get yourself back to a place of understanding that you are precious and the things that you offer to the world, it's precious and you are doing the best that you can, and just give yourself grace. Believe that in yourself. If you believe that in yourself, you will show up differently. At work, in your relationships, within your family, and all of that.
Well said. It's so beautiful. Absolutely. I cannot agree more. I think that before we can really receive what we're looking for, we have to believe that we deserve to receive it. And that's that inner work.
Absolutely.
For sure.
Absolutely.
Thank you again, Zoey. And how can folks get in touch with you and track you down for more wisdom and get your book?
So if you guys want to learn more about the analytics, you're welcome to hop on lovecanininfactbecalculated.com. The book is available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. If you're in Southern California, you can pick it up from the Spectrum Barnes & Noble location or Huntington Barnes & Noble location. Beyond that, you can find me on Instagram and TikTok at Zoey Charif, and I think that's it.
Amazing. Well, I'll make sure to drop all those links in the description so it's easy for y'all to touch base with her. But Zoey, I just wish I could give you a big ol' hug.
Thank you so much. You've been so sweet and such an incredible host. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure, truly. It was so great to connect. Thank you again for reaching out. And everyone, thank you for listening, tuning in, watching. Have a great rest of your day. I'm Savannah Rose. This is Eclipse Evolution, and we have had the amazing Zoey Charif today. Thank you all so much. Thank you again, Zoey, and take care, everybody. Love yourselves, okay? Do it. Bye.